This is Japan Journal Special Report. Trump federalizes D.C. Metro Police power move or political theater. The capital under command. Global viewers, the story you're about to hear is unprecedented. In a move that has sent shockwaves through Washington, D.C., President Donald Trump has invoked federal authority to take control of the Metropolitan Police Department of the District of Columbia. I'm sure you've heard by now. It's all over the world. And the official justification cites, quote, urgent national security concerns. Well, many legal scholars, civil rights advocates, and political analysts are calling it what it appears to be an authoritarian overreach with troubling implications for democracy. The action marks the first time in U.S. history that a sitting president has federalized D.C.'s civilian police force outside of a wartime scenario or catastrophic breakdown of local governance. And it comes at a time when the nation is deeply polarized, trust in institutions is at historic lows, and the line between public safety and political theater has grown dangerously thin. For our brothers and sisters watching around the globe, this is not just a Washington story. It is a test case for the very balance of power between federal authority and local control. It is also a barometer of how far an emboldened presidency will go to reshape the institutions of law enforcement in its own image. Well, tonight we break down the facts, the legal arguments, and the political consequences in 12 powerful segments. And we do so from the unique vantage point of Japan Journal, where fact-based truth prevails. Coming up right now, I'm your host, Mal Adams. Keep it right there.
From GNN, the Global News Network, a division of Totown Communications Company Japan. Japan Journal. With Mal Adams. A Black Buddha Productions joint of Japan. And now, your host, Malcolm W. Adams.
For the first time in American history, a president has seized direct control of D.C.'s civilian police force. Trump's order, announced in a late-night statement from the White House, cites extraordinary security threats linked to alleged intelligence about planned attacks on federal property. No concrete evidence has been released to the public. The move blindsided D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, who learned about it from media reports rather than formal consultation, a break from standard intergovernmental protocol. Well, the order shifts command authority from the D.C. police chief directly to a federal appointee, answerable only to the U.S. Attorney General. In practice, this means patrol assignments, crowd control, and investigative priorities are now subject to White House direction. Such a chain of command, critics say, opens the door to politicizing day-to-day policing in the nation's capital. Historically, D.C.'s unique status as a federal district has left it vulnerable to congressional interference, but never has its primary police department been taken over in peacetime. In the past, even during major protests from the 1968 riots to the 2020 George Floyd demonstrations, local control remained intact. Trump's move obliterates that precedent. Civil liberties groups immediately filed lawsuits, arguing the action violates the D.C. Home Rule Act of 1973, which guarantees a degree of local autonomy. The courts will now be forced to consider whether a president's assertion of public safety can override a half-century of legislative intent. The stakes go far beyond Washington. If the courts side with Trump, The door may open for similar federal interventions in other cities, particularly those politically opposed to the administration's agenda. For democracy, that is a door that once opened will be difficult to close. Trump's defenders insist that federal takeover is lawful under D.C.'s constitutional status. They point to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which grants Congress exclusive legislative authority over the district in all cases whatsoever. The president, they argue, is simply exercising that authority through the Department of Justice in a time of heightened security risk. But constitutional scholars counter that this reading ignores the D.C. Home Rule Act, which delegates most local governance, including policing, to the city elected officials. The Home Rule Act, they note, was intended to end the era of colonial-style rule over the district's majority Black population, allowing the president to override that framework without clear congressional authorization. They argue effectively returns the city to disenfranchisement. The courts now face a delicate balancing act, weigh the president's claimed security concerns against the principle of local self-government. In past cases, federal courts have been reluctant to wade too deeply into disputes over D.C.'s governance. This time, however, the stakes are constitutional. Legal analysts say the outcome could redefine the relationship between the federal government and the 700,000 residents of D.C. If Trump's move is upheld, the precedent could embolden future presidents to federalize local law enforcement in any city deemed critical to national interest. That raises chilling questions about how elastic national security could become in political hands. For the people of Washington, the legal battle will determine more than just who runs their police department. It will determine whether their right to govern themselves, already limited by their lack of congressional representation, will shrink even further under the weight of presidential decree. This is as much about political optics as it is about law enforcement. Even if the administration frames it as a security necessity, the political symbolism is unmistakable. Trump is asserting direct control over the streets of the capital city. In the eyes of many, this is an act designed to project strength to his base, while signaling to political opponents that dissent will meet with swift federal force. So the move comes amid a tense election season in which Trump has increasingly cast himself as the law and order candidate. But unlike Nixon's 1968 rhetoric, which relied on aligning with local police, Trump's strategy is to make those police answer to him directly. That shift from partnership to command is not subtle. It's a visual demonstration of centralized authority. Can you say stormtroopers, black boots, brown shirts? Huh? It's a total Nazi move, y'all. Now, Democrats have blasted the decision as a naked power grab, accusing Trump of using federal authority to suppress political opposition in a city where over 90% of voters historically reject him. Progressive activists warn that the takeover could be a prelude to federal intervention in cities like Chicago, Philadelphia, or Atlanta, all of which have strong Black leadership and histories of political resistance to Trump. Republicans, meanwhile, are divided. While some celebrate the move as decisive leadership in the face of perceived threats, others quietly fear the optics of militarizing local policing. One GOP strategist privately likened it to pouring gasoline on a political wildfire. Internationally, allies and adversaries alike are watching closely. In foreign capitals, like here in Tokyo, federalizing a city's police force is often a hallmark of authoritarian regimes. For America, the self-proclaimed beacon of democracy, the image is deeply damaging. So let's talk about federal policing in a majority Black city. Have you thought about this? The racial dynamics of this decision cannot be ignored, y'all. Washington, D.C. has long been a city where Black culture, politics, and leadership are deeply rooted. Yet, it is also a city where systemic disenfranchisement has been a lived reality for generations. The D.C. Home Rule Act of 1973 was meant to address that, giving residents a measure of local self-governance after decades of federal control. Trump's takeover reverses that progress. And for many Black Washingtonians, it feels like history repeated itself. From the days of federally appointed white commissioners ruling over Black majority to the FBI surveillance of civil rights leaders, DC's Black community knows what it means to live under federal oversight with little local voice. Civil rights advocates warn that placing the police under direct presidential control invites selective enforcement, targeted policing, and erosion of accountability. This concern is amplified by the administration's rhetoric, which often paints urban Black communities as centers of crime and disorder. You know the story. Narratives rooted in decades-old stereotypes. Black leaders in D.C. have been quick to point out the symbolic violence in this move. They argue that stripping local Black leadership of authority over their own police force sends a message. Your governance is conditional, your authority is temporary, and your autonomy is revocable. In the broader struggle for racial justice, the federalization of DC's police force is not an isolated act. It is part of a continuum where control over Black spaces and institutions can be seized under the pretext of security. That is a precedent with deep and very dangerous roots. So let's take it to the streets. Let's talk about street level reality in this situation. While politicians and lawyers argue the takeover is already changing life on the ground. Uniforms now bear new insignia. Command orders no longer come from familiar precinct leaders, but from federal appointees. Patrol patterns are shifting with a noticeable increase in visible presence around federal buildings and key political venues, while routine neighborhood policing appears deprioritized. Community activists report that officers seem more hesitant to engage in collaborative problem solving, fearing backlash from a federal chain of command that prioritizes order over relationship building. This is especially damaging in neighborhoods where trust in law enforcement has always been fragile. For residents, the presence of federally controlled police raises fears of political policing, where the criteria for suspicious activity may align more with ideological opposition than actual criminal conduct. Protest organizers have already noted heightened surveillance, increased stop and frisk incidents, and a chilling effect on public demonstrations. Longtime community leaders recall similar atmospheres during the civil rights era, when federal and local forces sometimes clashed over policing strategies, often to the detriment of the communities caught in the middle. If history is a guide, the longer this federal control persists, the more it will reshape the culture of the department, leaving scars that may outlast the political moment that sparked it. For Washingtonians, the fear is not just what happens now, but what becomes normal in the months and years ahead. Let's talk about the national security claim. Well, the stated reason for this unprecedented move is a vague but ominous national security threat. Nobody's seen any evidence of it. The administration claims to have intelligence of coordinated plots targeting multiple federal buildings and agencies. Yet, the public has seen no corroborating evidence, and members of Congress, including some in the president's own party, report receiving only the most general briefings. Without transparency, the threat narrative is functioning more as a political tool than a security measure. History offers cautionary tales. From the Gulf of Tonkin incident to post 9/11 claims about weapons of mass destruction. Urgent security warnings have too often been used to justify extraordinary measures later proven unnecessary or deceptive. Security experts stress that while genuine threats to the Capitol are real, they have traditionally been managed through coordination between local police, federal protective services, and intelligence agencies, not through the wholesale seizure of local policing authority. By skipping established channels and bypassing local leadership, the administration risks undermining trust between agencies, creating the very gaps in security it claims to be closing. In national security operations, cooperation is key, and federal overreach often breeds resistance, not compliance. If this is indeed about preventing an attack, then secrecy may be necessary. But if this is about consolidating control or shaping political narratives, then secrecy is a shield for something far more dangerous: the normalization of authoritarian measures under the banner of public safety. So let's talk about local politicians and the mayor's fight back. Mayor Muriel Bowser has vowed to challenge the takeover on every front. In a defiant press conference, she called the move an insult to the people of Washington, D.C., and a betrayal of democratic principles. She has mobilized the city's legal team to file for an emergency injunction, arguing that the federalization violates the Home Rule Act and exceeds presidential authority. Bowser's political position is complicated by D.C.'s unique lack of statehood. Unlike governors, she cannot summon the National Guard without federal permission, and her powers over city agencies exist at Congress's pleasure. This makes her legal case more difficult, but also more urgent, as the outcome could set precedent for all future mayors of the district. Her public stance has rallied city council members, community groups, and even some national lawmakers to her side. Advocacy organizations are organizing marches and legal fundraisers, framing the battle as not just about D.C., but about the right of any local community to govern itself without federal intrusion. In interviews, Bowser has drawn parallels between the takeover and historical moments when federal power was used to suppress local Black leadership, noting that the optics are not lost on anyone. Whether she can prevail in court is uncertain, but politically, Bowser has positioned herself as a defender of her city's dignity, a role that could elevate her national profile even as it puts her on a collision course with the president. So let's talk about voices from the street. Now, to understand the true impact, you have to listen to the people living under it. On U Street, a historical Black neighborhood, shop owners speak of unease. Quote, "It feels like they're not our police anymore," end quote, says one local cafe owner. "They're not here for us. They're here for the president." Young activists express anger at what they see as an occupation. This isn't about keeping us safe, says a Howard University student leader. This is about controlling us and sending a message. Longtime residents remember the 1968 riots and the military presence that followed. They say the atmosphere now feels eerily similar, tense, suspicious, and heavy, with the sense that every action is being watched. Even those who support the president's politics are uneasy with the idea of losing local control. "I voted for Trump, but this feels like too much," says a retired police sergeant. "We've always had our own chain of command. That's how you keep community trust." These voices cut through the legal and political debates. They are reminders that governance is not abstract. It is lived every day on the streets, in neighborhoods, and in the personal interactions between citizens and those sworn to serve them. So, what about the media and the framing about it and the public perception? Well, How this story is told will shape how it is understood. Pro-Trump media outlets frame the takeover as a bold, decisive action to protect America's capital from chaos and destruction. They highlight images of officers guarding federal landmarks and emphasize the president's role as a protector in uncertain times. Mainstream and progressive outlets, however, cast it as a dangerous power grab, using stark language about authoritarianism, racial injustice, and the dismantling of democratic norms. Their coverage focuses on interviews with DC residents, legal experts, and opposition politicians. Social media has amplified both narratives, creating echo chambers where audiences rarely encounter opposing views. Viral videos of officers confronting protesters feed one side's fears of repression. Clips of flag waving rallies in support of Trump feed the other's sense of urgency. And the administration understands the power of optics. And by taking control of DC's police, it has seized a central role in managing the images and stories that reach the public. In an era where perception can outweigh reality, that control is as politically valuable as the policing itself. What about international reactions? Well, I'm telling you, the world is watching, y'all. The world is watching, and the reactions are telling. Allies in Europe expressed concern, noting that federalizing local police is typically associated with authoritarian governments. Oh, Hitler did the same thing back in 1923 into the early 30s. It's not the American image we have known, said one senior EU diplomat. Canada's prime minister warned that democracy is strongest when local voices are heard and respected. In authoritarian states, however, the move is praised as decisive leadership. Russia and Chinese state media use it to highlight what they claim is America's hypocrisy, preaching local self-determination abroad while centralizing power at home. In developing nations, especially those with histories of colonial rule, the takeover is viewed through a post-colonial lens. Leaders and commentators draw parallels between DC's loss of local authority and their own struggles against distant powers. International perception matters. America's moral authority on the global stage has always been tied to its image as a functioning democracy. Actions like this, whether justified or not, erodes that image, making it harder to rally allies to inspire democratic movements elsewhere. And what about the precedent it sets? Well, if this stands, it will not be the last time. Trust me when I tell you. Legal precedent is a powerful thing. Once the courts accept that a president can federalize local police under the banner of security, future leaders, regardless of party, will be tempted to do the same. And each time, the threshold for what counts as a security threat will grow lower. Imagine a future where presidents routinely seize control of policing in cities governed by political opponents, where local leaders hesitate to challenge federal policies for fear that their police force could be taken away. That is not speculative fiction. It is the logical endpoint of the precedent now being tested. Democracy is fragile not just because of what we lose in the moment, but because of the powers we normalize for the future. The question is not just whether Trump should have this power now, but whether any president should have it at all. So where this goes next? Well, the battle will now unfold in three arenas: the courts, the streets, and the court of public opinion through media, like here on Japan Journal. In the legal arena, judges will weigh constitutional authority against statutory limits. In the streets, protesters and police will navigate a tense and heavily surveilled environment. And in public opinion, America will decide whether this is leadership or overreach. The outcome will shape more than just Washington, D.C. It will shape the balance of power between federal and local governments for a generation. For those who believe in self-governance, the path forward requires vigilance, legal action, and persistent public pressure. For those who welcome strongman tactics, this is a moment to push further. Either way, this is a turning point, one whose consequences will echo far beyond the capital streets. So in closing, let me give you this summary and call to action. The federal takeover of D.C.'s police is not just a news event, no. It is a test of democracy's guardrails. It asks whether the promise of local self-rule can survive when confronted by centralized executive power. This moment demands more than passive observation, my people. It demands scrutiny, civic engagement, and a refusal to accept permanent erosion of democratic norms under the guise of temporary necessity. History will remember not only what was done, but who stood silent and who spoke out. Well, we're speaking out right now, my brothers and sisters. And let me tell you that in my decades covering politics, I've seen power claimed in the name of safety more times than I care to count. The pattern is always the same. The power is taken or rarely returned, and the justification is always framed as a crisis. Today's crisis may fade, but the precedent will remain. If you believe this is only about Washington, you are mistaken. What happens in D.C. will ripple outward, shaping how every American city can be governed or taken over in the years ahead. We must decide now whether we are comfortable living in a nation where policing is not just a matter of public safety, but a tool of political dominance. This is your brother Mal Adams reporting for Japan Journal, your window on the world from Japan. Thank you very much for joining. Please like, please share, please comment, and please subscribe to this platform so we can keep you informed and impart the truth as we know it. Thank you very much and good day.
From GNN, the Global News Network, a division of Totown Communications Company Japan. Japan Journal. With Mal Adams. A Black Buddha Productions joint of Japan.